And he's got coverage for us live in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Vuyo Mvoko joins us now. Vuyo, it's just after 9 o'clock for us. I believe it's a good afternoon for you there in Rio. And quite the program ahead of us already, with the president having a lot to prepare himself for over the next few days.
He does indeed, and since his arrival yesterday, he has been at its meeting with the African group, meeting with several presidents and prime minister, but perhaps the most notable of all the meetings that he has had today is the meeting he had with the host, but also the president of Brazil, Mr. Lula da Silva. And that meeting was so crucial for him because, remember, in a few years' time, President Ramaphosa will be taking over as the president of the G20, taking over, of course, from President Lula. So one would imagine that at that closed meeting which they had this morning, which was his first meeting of the day, they would have shared notes, and I'm sure President Ramaphosa would have had a lot of note-taking to do, because one would imagine after a year and after 200 meetings, President da Silva would have made up his mind about a whole lot of things, and perhaps would have had an opportunity to share with President Ramaphosa, who's going to take over from him, some of the things that he perhaps had never had an opportunity to share with his peers, to share with anyone else. And considering the fact that it was outside of the pressures, of having met other people as he's going into tomorrow's main sessions, President Lula da Silva would have had an opportunity to say, look out for this when we get together tomorrow and the day after, so that you prepare yourself adequately for what you're about to inherit, that which you're going to have to run with over the next year, all the way to the end of the year when the summit is going to be held in Johannesburg.
To ignore that, last year, of course, we saw South Africa chairing the BRICS summit last year. And now this year, South Africa taking over the G20 presidency in Rio de Janeiro. And I'm looking at a statement from the presidency, Vuyo, that talks about how this is an opportunity to consolidate initiatives of Global South predecessors from the 1st of December this year. So that really is going to talk to, I suppose, the opportunities that lie ahead for South Africa taking on this very important role.
Of course, taking over from Brazil, which is also a member of the BRICS nations, President Ramaphosa has an opportunity, but also a challenge to then consolidate, especially as this moment comes on the back of an election that the United States of America just had. President Trump will become the next president of the G20. So what President Ramaphosa would have to do over the next year on the back of what Brazil has done is going to be very crucial, because it will, I guess, be the differentiator when America gets to then become the president, become the president of the G20. So lots on his shoulders, indeed. And of course, we know the geopolitical situation, what is happening in Israel and Palestine, what is happening in Ukraine versus Russia. Bearing in mind that Africa has its own agenda, and generally that nations of the South have their own agenda which they have been pursuing, not only at G20 but also at BRICS. That so much is going on that President Ramaphosa is going to be perhaps the most sober person when those heads of state actually meet here tomorrow.
Yeah, one wonders if there'd be a continuation of conversations, considering that we've seen COP29 wrapping up just today, Vuyo, and then the G20 Summit kicking off. And the big conversation there has been climate funding, and if that's going to be on the agenda, certainly for President Ramaphosa as he attends the G20.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And it's a big one, especially, as I just said, when you now have, President Trump's President-designate Trump is known for his views on the climate. So everyone is anticipating a lot of pushback from the United States under his presidency. So over the next couple of days, this summit would have to set the tone for what America is going to inherit when it takes over the presidency of the G20. Of course, that's not the only issue. There's the just energy transition, which is a big one. Where is the funding, or what has happened to the funding that has already been there? What's going to happen next? What's the next step? And there are a whole host of other things, of course, about the plight of the poor around the world, about other wars that have been forgotten. We're talking about Sudan as an example. So there's so much on the agenda, and there are people who are agitating. There are nations that feel, for example, that they have not been really a part of the G20 agenda, that this remains an exclusive club. That doesn't really serve everybody. They too are going to want to be seen and heard at this particular summit, precisely because some of them, I was talking to one diplomat, some of them feel that they may not have another opportunity to make their voice heard once other people take over beyond what the BRICS nations would have done. And we're talking here about Brazil, the current president, and of course, South Africa, the next president. Some feel that beyond the South African presidency, the gap may just expand, and their voice will be heard less and less. So a lot expected to come out of this particular G20 summit.
Yep, lots expected indeed, and Vuyo Mvoko will be keeping us updated over the next 2 days. They're live from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And of course, if you were to take a look at the G20 website, for instance, you'd find that G20.org is already speaking about the presidency of South Africa set to commence on the 1st of December. And it reads, it will be the first time that the continent will be the continent with the most young people in the world will host G20, and the youth are excited to start their work.